Captain Nathaniel Nate Carter had seen his fair share of alien worlds, but Norath 3 was unlike any other. The planet's twin suns painted the sprawling forest in hues of emerald and gold, a sight that seemed almost tranquil. But Nate wasn't here for sightseeing. As a seasoned operative of the Earth Defense Corps DC, his mission was to assess the recent disappearance of a Terran diplomatic envoy. Norath 3, home to the reclusive quarry species, had long been considered neutral ground, but now tensions ran high. Nate was greeted by an eerie silence as he ventured deeper into the quarry enclave. His boots crunched on crystalline soil, his senses sharp. The quarry were known for their intricate social structures and their fiercely protective nature toward their young. Yet the enclave appeared deserted. As Nate scanned the area, he noticed subtle signs of struggle. Scorch marks on walls, shattered alien artifacts, and, most chilling of all, a faint trail of blood. Following the trail, Nate stumbled upon a small cavern hidden beneath a canopy of bioluminescent vines. Inside, a group of quarry cubs huddled together, their wide, luminescent eyes filled with fear. They were barely more than toddlers by human standards. It didn't take long for Nate to piece together what had happened. The cubs' guardians had been ambushed, leaving the young ones vulnerable. And if the attackers were who he suspected, the ruthless Girardarn raiders, the cubs wouldn't survive the night. "It's okay," Nate said softly, lowering his weapon and extending a hand. The cubs flinched but didn't run. He could see the desperation in their eyes. They were too young to understand his words, but they understood the universal language of kindness. Nate's comlink crackled to life. "Captain Carter, what's your status?" He hesitated for a moment before responding. "Mission parameters have changed. I've found survivors. Initiating extraction." Little did he know, this act of compassion would ignite a chain of events that would change the galaxy forever. The cubs' frightened chittering was the only sound accompanying Nate as he led them through the dense forest. He'd rigged a makeshift sled from his survival kit, pulling the cubs along as they traversed uneven terrain. Overhead, the twin suns had begun their descent, casting elongated shadows that danced ominously. A sharp, mechanical screech pierced the air. Nate froze. His HUD lit up with multiple signals converging on his location. The Girardarn had found him. "Stay quiet," he whispered to the cubs, who now trembled in silent terror. With a practiced motion, he slung his plasma rifle off his shoulder and activated its targeting system. Nate had fought the Girardarn before. They were brutal, merciless, and heavily armed. But he wasn't about to let them take the cubs. The first raider burst through the underbrush, its grotesque exoskeleton glinting in the fading light. Nate fired, the plasma bolt hitting its mark. The creature let out a guttural roar before collapsing. More followed, their guttural war cries echoing through the forest. Nate moved with calculated precision, his training kicking in. He took cover behind a massive tree, picking off enemies one by one. But for every Girardarn he felled, 2 more seemed to take its place. A bolt of energy whizzed past him, narrowly missing his head. The situation was dire. Nate knew he couldn't hold them off forever. As the Girardarn closed in, he activated a distress beacon. It would take hours for reinforcements to arrive, but it was his only option. "Come on, Carter," he muttered to himself. Think. Spotting a natural choke point up ahead, Nate devised a plan. He led the cubs to the narrow pass, setting up a series of improvised explosives along the way. As the Girardarn gave chase, he triggered the charges. The resulting explosion shook the ground, sending debris flying and buying him precious time. With the path temporarily blocked, Nate pushed forward, his determination unwavering. The cubs' survival depended on him, and he wasn't about to let them down. As night fell, the forest came alive with bioluminescent flora and fauna. Nate's tactical visor illuminated the path ahead, but his energy reserves were running low. He found a secluded clearing and set up a temporary shelter, using thermal blankets to keep the cubs warm. Their trust in him had grown, and one of them even curled up against his side, its small frame trembling less than before. Nate's moment of respite was interrupted by a low, rumbling growl. He reached for his weapon, scanning the darkness. Emerging from the shadows was a towering figure clad in ornate armor. It was a Qwari elder, one of the few who had survived the attack. The elder's eyes glowed with a mixture of sorrow and gratitude as they took in the sight of the cubs. "You are the Terran who shielded our young," the elder asked in a deep, resonant voice. Nate nodded. "I'm just trying to get them to safety." The elder studied him for a moment before extending a clawed hand. "Then you have the gratitude of the Qwari. And my blade." With the elder's help, Nate learned more about the Juridarn's motives. They weren't just raiding for resources. They sought to destabilize the region, using fear as their weapon. The elder revealed a hidden sanctuary where the cubs could be safe, but it was a perilous journey through Juridarn-controlled territory. "We'll make it," Nate said, his voice firm. Together, the journey to the sanctuary was grueling. Nate and the elder formed an unlikely alliance, their combined skills allowing them to outmaneuver the Juridarn. The elder's intimate knowledge of the terrain proved invaluable, while Nate's tactical expertise kept them one step ahead of their pursuers. At one point, they encountered a Juridarn patrol blocking their path. Nate devised a daring plan to create a diversion while the elder led the cubs to safety. Using his last EMP grenade, he disabled the patrol's vehicles, buying them enough time to slip through undetected. But the Juridarn weren't the only threat. The forest itself seemed determined to test their resolve. They faced venomous predators, treacherous terrain, and energy-draining storms. Yet through it all, Nate's determination never wavered. He'd sworn to protect the cubs, and nothing would stop him from fulfilling that promise. The sanctuary was unlike anything Nate had ever seen. Hidden within a massive cavern, it was a self-sustaining ecosystem powered by advanced Qwari technology. Bioluminescent plants provided light, while cascading waterfalls served as both a water source and a natural barrier against intruders. The elder explained that the sanctuary was a sacred site, a place where the Qwari had preserved their history and culture for generations. But it was also their last line of defense. If the Juridarn found it, all would be lost. Nate immediately set to work fortifying the sanctuary's defenses. Using what little resources they had, he constructed traps, reinforced entry points, and trained the elder in Terran combat techniques. The cubs watched in awe, their fears slowly giving way to admiration. As they prepared for the inevitable attack, Nate reflected on his own humanity. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for the principles that defined him: compassion, courage, and the unwavering belief that every life had value. The Juridarn came at dawn, their forces overwhelming in number. Nate and the elder fought side by side, their bond forged in the crucible of battle. The traps Nate had set proved effective, but the enemy's relentless assault pushed them to their limits. When the sanctuary's outer defenses were breached, Nate took a desperate gamble. He activated a dormant Qwari weapon, a relic of an ancient war. The device unleashed a blinding wave of energy, disintegrating the Juridarn forces, but leaving Nate gravely injured in the process. Word of Nate's sacrifice spread across the galaxy. The Qwari hailed him as a hero, erecting a monument in his honor at the sanctuary. The cubs he had saved grew up to become leaders, carrying forward his legacy of resilience and unity. Back on Earth, Nate's story became a symbol of humanity's indomitable spirit. Though he was gone, his actions had left an indelible mark on the galaxy, proving that even in the face of overwhelming odds, a single human could make a difference. And so, Nathaniel Carter became more than a man. He became a legend,